We're currently in a situation where games can cost more than $100 for deluxe editions. For some reason, studios and publishers seem to be under the impression that AAA games are worthy those amounts of money. Of course, most people disagree, but why is that? With the current political climate full of uncertainties, tensions, taxes and, oh yeah, tariffs.
I always say tariffs is the most beautiful word to me in the dictionary.
The average gamer, not the hardcore one, I'm talking about the average Joe working his 9 to 5, then coming back home to his family, and wanting to play some AAA slop that he read is a massive success and a quote-unquote return to form of his favorite franchise. This average Joe will maybe spend $80 on a game every 3 or 4 months. He doesn't have the kind of money or addiction to drop cash continuously on the next big release. We have also to talk about the value that a game brings. That is a discourse for the most passionate gamers that keep up with the news and gossips of new games, studios, and their statements and practices. If you had to spend $80, I bet spending them on a Baldur's Gate 3 or a Cyberpunk would bring you much more bang for your buck than spending them on a Veilguard or on an Assassin's Creed Shadows. So, in this climate where the average gamers are unwilling to spend more than strictly necessary, and the hardcore ones are making sure to check if they really like a game before throwing their money at it, here comes beloved developer Randy Pitchford with this statement. As you can easily believe, people took that very well. No wonder the reception has been this negative. Not only the statement feels rude and without much empathy, it is about a Borderlands game. Given how badly the third installment was received, in no small part by the awful millennial writing and some very poor decisions in handling beloved characters and introducing new ones, it is not surprising in the least that people think that the series offers decent gameplay but is otherwise the definition of slop. To be completely honest though, Randy prefaced that by saying that the pricing of the game was a decision that is out of his hands. Still, that doesn't really make what he said that much better, and I honestly think this will impact the sales of the game, since many that were on the fence, but had already identified the franchise as mediocre, will now simply not bother buying the game at all. In this IGN article, Take-Two's boss, Strauss Zelnick, weighed in on the matter, explaining that consumers would be willing to pay for the very best and that it is their job to make the very best. My question is this really the very best they can do? Because from the trailers it doesn't look much like it.
Please, be my guest.
Why couldn't they just go through,
Let's throw
like,
some light on this black site of his.
Everyone else heard the talking creep, right?
Tim feels like the product of Lichter's twisted mind. Another of his experiments.
Okay.
We need to get inside.
This age of humor is so
That
over,
air
man.
vent. Let's check it out.
Stop.
I'm not saying they should even get rid of the humor the series has, but at least improve the writing. The fact that in a trailer there are already traces of millennial humor, which has been stale for at least 5 years, is concerning and, in the eyes of the consumers they wish to attract, is a major turnoff. At least the gameplay looks fine, but gameplay alone will not boost your sales if the masses have decided that your game is lame. So, possibly $80 for the standard edition of this. I say possibly because we won't know for sure until they put it on sale with pre-orders and whatnot. Yet, as mentioned, most people cannot spend that much money on more than a game every few months. Why not take a look at what games Borderlands 4, releasing in September, will have to contend with that are freshly released or will release soon, around its launch date. Oh my. I tried to highlight a few that I assume will be fairly popular with a wide audience, and, while for September the games that Borderlands will have to fight with are few, August has some heavy hitters like Mafia: The Old Country and Metal Gear Solid Delta. On top of that, October has Ghost of Yotei, which I think it's fair to assume will also sell a good amount. For September itself, the game will have to face off against Hell Is Us, which I think needs to step up their advertising, since I had already forgotten about it, and Deep Rock Galactic. I did not highlight Marathon as I am already assuming that the game will be delayed. But yeah, this does not bode well for Randy and Zelnick. This brings us to the actual topic of the video. The fact that the AAA industry needs to stop the high production games they make and dial down the budgets, the scope of their projects and, with them, the price at which they try to sell their products. I already explained how the average person is torn between a multitude of expenses, and definitely will not purchase more than a few AAA games per year. But mind how I am being specific about AAA games only. The reality is that the AAA industry is more and more being overshadowed by competent and passionate smaller studios that put out AA games with a fraction of the budget of some of these AAA games and take the gaming community by storm, with lower and more affordable price tags and with no need to go through 1,000 compromises to their artistic vision to appease out-of-touch higher-ups that are not going to play the game but are only interested in min-maxing the amount of sales. They are not even alone. Thousands upon thousands of indie developers and studios are currently making a tidal wave of games and, while some may be more of a meme, and while others clearly are the works of amateurs, it is not rare for something to catch on and turn into a huge financial success for them. So it has been with Minecraft, so it has been with Five Nights at Freddy's, so it has been for Undertale and so it has been for Balatro. All games made by very small studios or even just one guy, a one-man army whose masterpiece comes at the right time to shake the industry. Currently the games fighting for Best Game of the Year are Expedition 33, Split Fiction and Blueprints. None of these is a AAA game. Think about it, what would the average consumer do? Spend $80 on a single AAA game that, sure will be fun for a while, but will probably hit them with microtransactions, overpriced DLCs, battle passes for single-player experiences. Or, buy a AA game of $45, maybe an indie for $15 and then a couple more indie games for $9 each. That is 4 games and, usually, AA games and indie games offer complete experiences with no microtransactions, stories that go from start to finish and are not to be explored in some DLC down the line. The point I'm trying to make is simple: if the AAA industry keeps going the way they currently are, with their bloat, excessive staffing, unhealthy working conditions, astronomical budgets and high price tags with the promise of microtransactions and whatnot to entice players to spend even more on the same game, the AAA industry is going to trip over itself and burn. We are seeing this a lot with so many projects like Concord, maybe even with Marathon. Gargantuan budgets on studios that have been deprived of vision, passion, and freedom to explore concepts that are not safe, are more often result in failure, rather than become the huge money-printing factories the top execs dream about. In other words, the industry is in need of a shift, a refocus, together with a downscaling of these huge productions. Sure, GTA 6 has a budget that is in the billions, but not every AAA is GTA or Red Dead Redemption. Not every AAA needs a budget of $200 to $400+ millions of dollars. I would argue that the overwhelming majority of AAA games that don't want to go the live service route don't need those kinds of money. They need good direction and a focus on giving players games they will be happy to enjoy. Of course, at an affordable price. I saw the prices go from $60 to $70 and now $80, but, for the last time, this is unsustainable for these AAA monsters. Too many get turned away by the steep price tags. There are too many competitors that sell masterpieces for barely more than half the price you ask, and then, there are thousands of smaller competitors that sell hyper-focused and niche experiences, selling for 1/8 to even 1/16 of what you ask us to pay. Randy may say to make it happen, but the average consumers don't do miracles. When you start pricing your products that high, either you offer an experience worth that amount of money or you are bound to be left in the dust by those that sell not only for much lower prices but, too often, offer even much better and more refreshing experiences. As I said, a shift of sorts is in order. How it will happen or when, I cannot say, but what I can say is that, at this rhythm, it is only a matter of time before too many studios get closed or dismembered by the next Embracer group. We are seeing it so often, a group of devs fed up with working at Ubisoft, fed up with seeing their artistry, vision and passion choked out of them by corporate greed, leave the studio and make one of the best games of the year, and I would argue, after playing it, one of the best RPGs of the decade. A group of devs that were told too often that they had to tone down their vision, take away the grit, cut away the edges, unites as a smaller indie studio and start working on one of the darkest and most compelling games I have ever seen. These are just a couple of examples, but you, dear viewers, get the point. My only wish is that these corporations, that own so many of our beloved IPs, may also start to see reason and start going smarter, not bigger. But what do you think? Is an $80 price tag for standard editions justified? Is the industry fine as it is? Or are they in dire need of a change of mindset when it comes to developing AAA products? I think I presented my point fairly, maybe not as eloquently as I could, but I definitely don't want to take your attention for an entire day. For all that matters, I am happy you listened to my ramblings on this situation and, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. As for dear Randy Pitchford, I guess we will have to see if Borderlands has the balls to come out asking people to pay $80 for it, and, if it does, we will also have to check if enough people pay for it to be a financial success. Again, I thank you all for listening and, as usual, all videos showcased and articles mentioned will be in the video description. I think I took enough of your time, so this is goodbye for now. I will see you all in the next video. Peace.